Sam with Bayshore Plumbers. Welcome to my shop. Today I'm going to show you guys how to properly install and then replace angle stops. We're going to first concentrate on compression. That's the mock sink that we got here. It's already set up for that. And this mock sink here is what I use to train the guys here in training. Instead of making mistakes later on in your house, we can make them all here with this mock sink. I've got a few tools, really basic stuff. You don't need to go out and buy all these expensive tools or whatnot. I'll show how to do it with both. We've got some cool tools that we can do, and I got some basic stuff. Tools that we're going to be using, like I said, are pretty basic. You can buy it at any plumbing supply place, Lowe's, Home Depot. All basic stuff here. We've got a couple small channel locks, my favorite tool. We also have, this is basically just a wrench or a leverage wrench that you use to actually screw on to the angle stop. It's specifically designed for that. It's got compression threads there. We got basically a crescent wrench. We got a Pasco puller. This pulls the ferrule for removing existing angle stops. Just a basic reed cutter, piping cutter. We've got a wrench that we could use or interchange. This is pretty cool. I like it. It keeps it nice and slick. Instead of using the channel locks, I use crescent wrenches or wrenches themselves so it doesn't scrape the actual nut. Then we get just a typical, 6-in-1 screwdriver, a reamer, a couple of scutcheon plates, and our angle stops that we will be installing today. Here we go. Let's cover the meat and potatoes of this. We've got a couple caps on here that normally would be soldered on. This is just a training mock-up sink here. So the proper way of cutting back a pipe and setting it to the wall, you've got to account for a couple of things. The length of the pipe, you've also got to account for the scutcheon ring that we talked about. So in this situation, since this is a mock-up sink, I'm going to remove this. All right. Now, a good way of doing it is you want to measure from the wall to your cut between 1.25 inches and 1.5 inches. Now, 1.25 inches is going to show zero pipe. You're just going to have your scutcheon plate and you're going to have your angle stop. Now, that's great for an application where you're doing it underneath the sink. People are going to see it, your toilet. But underneath the kitchen, unless you're going underneath there because you're a plumber or you're putting your own stuff away, you could just kind of just do it off the fly, right? Now, normally, and I'll show that because you got the zoom in here, I would normally be cutting this with my fingernail measurement at 1.25 inches. I'd get my cutters and put them on and cut, right? Since this is a mock-up sink, I don't want to just train this once. I'm going to cut it back over here and just cut a piece of it. This has an arrow on it. You want to cut one way with their auto cuts. John, as soon as you're done cutting any pipe or any copper pipe, you've got a burr in here. You want to minimize the friction in the water, so you got to always use a reamer, even if you're soldering or you're putting an angle stop on. Let's just deburr it. All right, kind of fish it out. Now we're set. We install our angle stop scutcheon plate. And if you notice, that covers everything. Any imperfection that's in there, it kind of gets covered by this plate. Right? Just looks neater. Now, there's a couple ways to do this, right? Install your nut. Put your ferrule in there. Make sure this pipe is nice and clean. I personally don't recommend sanding. You don't want to score the pipe. But as long as it's clean, it'll work. Now, some plumbers apply pipe dope just on the inside of this or out here for a tighter seal. It's a good idea, except if you apply too much, that could flow in and clog up your faucet, right? I've done it both ways. Sometimes you need it. I've never actually had one leak if I didn't install pipe dope on it. This ferrule nut compresses against the inner diameter of this valve and it seals pretty good. So we're going to go without. And you install this valve till it snaps in there. You got to make sure, just put some pressure on it. It doesn't take much. Get it all the way in, and then screw the compression nut and the ferrule right onto the valve. Right? It's nice and loose here. Right? Now, a couple ways of doing this, depending on what you have. I'll do it the homeowner way, where you don't have fancy tools, you just got a crescent wrench. Nice even pressure on the back side of it, keeping it going. All right. You got to be careful because this will scar it up, right? And what you'd be doing is be literally just tightening this down. You tighten it down, make sure it's nice and straight or at an angle, wherever you want to do it. And you tighten it down like that, right? And we'll be doing more so I don't scar this up. I'm gonna use this little tool that I normally use and really crank it down. This one's a little tight, it'll work. You can also use this tool to make sure I'm nice and straight. I'm gonna take it in, right? It's not working so well, different angle stop. And I hold it in place and I tighten down, right? You want to tighten down pretty tight. All right, once it starts skipping a little bit, make sure it's nice and straight, move it around, give it another little nudge. All right? Once you take this off, you shouldn't be able to turn it anymore, right? Now it's nice and tight. The ferrule inside of the nut tightened down against the interior diameter of the valve itself. Just like any ball valve, direction the flow of the water is on, turn it off. When it's cutting the water, it's off, right? Direction of the water, on, cutting the water off, it's off. So this is nice and tight there. Once this is done, left being hot, you would get your hot side angle flex line and you would screw it right onto this. You can use either or to tighten it down. This is pretty quick. You don't want to scar it too bad. You can use this guy here. Hold the angle stop in place. Right. Tighten it down. Alright, careful not to open tighten. And that's pretty much it. That's the installation of an angle stop. Now after covering the installation, we're going to use this opportunity to cover the replacement of an angle stop. Now in this case here, we installed a single angle stop. The replacement is going to be done by a dual angle stop, also quarter turn, also ball valve. And this is what this looks like right here. So I'm going to cover down and remove the proper removal of it and replacement. We're going to use a little bit different tools. At the beginning it's the same. Comes off fairly easy. Now granted, the water's already off at your house. Anytime you're accessing any angle stop, the water's got to be off. Alright, off and drained out in the hose bib. In the situations that's already happened, I'm going to install this. And I'm going to do the same thing but in reverse. I'm just going to just push that off. Alright, you got to apply a little bit of force. Once you get a little bit, it'll come right off. Alright, that comes off. Now this in here, it's stuck. it actually crimped down on the pipe. So we've got to remove this. In order to remove this properly, and granted, you'll probably learn in other places where you can just swap this out and reuse this ferrule nut. I don't recommend it. I've actually had leaks. These ferrule pullers are fairly inexpensive and totally worth it. So these install, you kind of just put these in, and it has an extraction mechanism that goes inside of the pipe. And it just kind of mechanically pulls it out. Right? I use my screwdriver. With one hand I hold the puller, the other hand I just twist like this. Goes in, pulls the ferrule. Out. Alright? The nut and ferrule kind of gets stuck in my device here. Put that away. Alright? Always good to clean it up a little bit. Just make sure it's nice and slick, and you're good. Now the installation is going to be the same as before. The nut goes in first, then the ferrule. Usually you don't have to cut the pipe. There are situations if the ferrule is put on too tight that you're going to have to cut a piece of the pipe. In this situation it was done right, so you don't need to. Alright? And you just repeat what you did before. This time we're putting on a double angle stop. You might need to hook up a dishwasher, a refrigerator, and you don't have an additional stub out. This splits it up. You can actually have this one off and this one on, and since it's got two valves on it, it can be used for future use. Alright, tighten that on it, repeat. Alright, try to keep it nice and straight, and you got to tighten it down. Alright, good leverage is important. Gotta make it skip a little bit. You'll feel you get really tight. You kind of start skipping just like that. I don't know if you can hear that. Again, you can use a wrench or something to hold the other one down. If you want to protect the threads, you can actually, if you don't have a wrench, you can kind of protect this one and kind of grab onto it. It's always nice just to get the right tool. They're fairly cheap. You probably get them for about 15 bucks or cheaper. Alright? Always protect the threads so that you don't damage them. After that, I'm just going to grab your hot side, same thing as before, make sure it's off, install this. If you've got old pipe, it's always good to drain it out first, not hook up directly to your faucet, but actually on the other end of this flex line, actually drain it out into a bucket, try to get the rust out first if you've got an older home with rusty pipes. If not, new home, new installation, you can do that. My preferred method is always to use something with a straight edge without teeth to do any finished work so that it doesn't mark it. Alright. Don't over tighten these, they have a gasket. Kind of just hold the flex line with one hand and then just counter thread it there as you hold, get it nice and snug. If it leaks, turn it on, test it. If it leaks, tighten it up a little bit more. And after that, the water's on, make sure that one's off if you haven't hooked up to it. Another one would literally just be screwing onto this. I don't have a 1/4 inch here. Turn it on and you're good to go. All right?
If you guys enjoyed the video, go ahead and give us a big thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and comment down below on any topics you want us to cover. Thanks for tuning in.